Never mind the noise and the chatter. We are here for intelligent, fact-based conversation on this episode of Bergen Banter. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Larry Levanka, the host of the official Bergen Community College podcast. Today's topic, making the case. Of course, with the recent Nancy Guthrie scenario in Tucson, Arizona, there's been a lot of focus on law enforcement and how a case is made, or in that case, not made, in a missing person scenario. So we brought in once of the NYPD, but today he is a Bergen Community College faculty member, Frank Corrigan. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You bet, Frank. So, two parts to this conversation. Yeah, we definitely want to get into the Nancy Guthrie case and some of the specifics there and some of the things that went wrong or didn't go right, maybe is a better way of putting it, and why she is still missing as of today. But I want to start when we're talking about a missing persons case and law enforcement. How does that process work throughout the various stages of an investigation? So let's start right there. What happens when somebody first goes missing? How does law enforcement get involved?
Well, there are different types of missing persons. Sometimes people are missing voluntarily, and in contrast to Miss Guthrie's case where she's more of an involuntary missing. But you'll have people that'll go missing voluntarily. Now, as adults go, voluntary missings, my husband didn't come home last night, and things of that nature. The police department, they'll take the information, they'll do the routine, make sure he isn't incarcerated or had an accident, is he dead or what have you.
Sleeping in the car.
That type of thing, exactly. But then there is the other type where you're looking at maybe a child, even though it may be voluntary on the child's part. Parents are concerned, especially when you have a small child. When you have a child that's like 10 and under in the New York City Police Department, for example, or in a lot of departments, you have a small child missing, irregardless of the circumstance, you're pulling out all the stops. You're going to utilize every one of your assets to find that child because hopefully it could be something as innocuous. They're over at a friend's house and they forgot to tell somebody, but it could also be a worst-case scenario.
More heinous, obviously, an abduction, kidnapping, Amber Alerts. We all get them on our phones, and that's now a nationwide thing. But so, I would imagine regardless if it's a adult or child, time is a big factor.
Time is a very large factor. Like when an adult, like I say, an ordinary adult is not usually something that, we're immediately going to do. But here in this case, we have Mrs. Guthrie's case. She's an older adult. Now, an older adult, the police department's going to do a lot more, even though it may be even voluntarily that they may have left. Why? Because they could have issues with, as in Ms. Guthrie's case, medication, health issues. They could have also other age-related issues like dementia, Alzheimer's, things of this nature. A lot of people, there are many different forms of Alzheimer's dementia. Some of them, like are gallopers, they tend to wander off. Others, however, tend to go back, go really back, and they'll go to their old neighborhood but not know where they live. Currently, they'll go back 50, 60 years. And they can be difficult, like a lot of nursing homes and what have you. They'll have now, of course, you're on phones, you can locate people, but they would have little tags.
Bracelets,
And bracelets. So if they wander off, they can find them, or if the alarm will go off before they get too far, and therefore they can find them. But those are the things. It depends on what it is, because sometimes you can also have an involuntary disappearance. And when you have an involuntary disappearance, that's when the police really have to, because especially if there's a phone call, there's a note left, or someone sees it's an abduction, like you could see it out in the street, abduction, someone is taken by force. Sometimes it's not what it seems. It turns out it's all right, but a lot of times, no, this does happen. It does happen a lot. There are things that end kind of safely, like they're carjacking somebody. They want to take the car. They usually get rid of the person. However, sometimes both you have adults and you've had children. Like people will leave their car running. I'm just running inside.
Right.
And there's the child in the back seat. Someone gets in, blah, blah, blah. Now the child is missing also. And everybody's looking for that. But of course, the person who steals the car, realizing someone's in the car and it's a baby, usually they want to get rid of it like the hot potato because they know everybody will be coming to look for that. Not so much the car, but the child.
For sure. And time, obviously, of the essence.
Time is of the essence.
This requires coordination. Obviously, as I introed, you were part of the NYPD, but I'm sure there were times that other agencies got involved. How does that process work? In as it relates to not just generally, but the Guthrie case as well.
Well, in the Guthrie case, right? If someone is involuntarily taken, like in this case, once the phone call, okay, Miss Guthrie didn't show up at church. And so maybe they responded to Mrs. Guthrie's daughter's residence. So, of course, the next thing is to respond to her residence. I mean, you get to the residence right away. You could tell the Ring door camera, there's blood outside right away, so now you know it's involuntary. Right away, you got to start notifying adjoining agencies, the federal agencies in particular, the FBI, because that's their thing, kidnappings, people of that nature. Because why? Jurisdictional reasons is a big thing. Like most local departments only cover a certain geographic area, and they have only jurisdiction within a certain specific area. The FBI, on the other hand, has jurisdiction throughout the 50 states and all U.S. territories.
It's about resources too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They have mobility, they have resources, and they have also personnel in all spread out. See, like if you're the local police department, say in this case, the Pima County Sheriff's, you have people, but you only cover Pima County. The FBI has people all over the country, and they can alert other field officers right away, and they liaison with their local PDs right away, and especially if you have a description of a person, a vehicle, this helps to notify people, to locate people as quickly as possible.
You would hope it's collaborative, but
you would hope.
But I would imagine sometimes it does become somewhat tribal in that one agency doesn't want to work with the other. Or
one of the biggest lessons we learned from 9/11 was the fact that different agencies were not communicating with each other. So in theory, we all learned that lesson. However, people tend to be territorial. And depending on the situation, depending on who's running the investigation, depending on the department, you'll have people who are territorial. And it's the nature of the beast, and unfortunately, people do not understand. It's not about the agency or the individual from the agency. It's about the person that is missing.
So it's right. Egos you have to put aside, but I think again, perfect world.
Yes,
we all know that. But in reality, especially when it's a high-profile case,
of course,
egos get involved. How is the determination made about who is going to lead a case? I mean, you talked about before that if it's kidnapping, it goes to the FBI, but obviously in the Guthrie case, Tucson, Pima County, still very much involved in the investigation.
Oh yeah. Well, you would start with the local jurisdiction, like in other words, because when someone's missing, you're starting from the point they're missing from, right, where she lives. So from her home. So you're starting from there. That's Pima County. So the local agency there, you would expect them to do the immediate search, process the crime scene, do all the basic steps. You would think they would immediately liaison with the FBI because you have this thing, because also, she's a high profile. Right. This is not just a regular kidnapping. This is someone whose daughter is a national figure. You need to liaison with, if Miss Guthrie, when she got into the thing, or I would call the NYPD. Have there been any threats made against Savannah Guthrie? I would call, as we found out later, there started to get information, TMZ was getting people calling up. I would have called the LAPD, had them sit in their studio there because supposedly they were sent letters and then their phone calls made. I'd be on top of that. I'm sure the FBI would notify their local field office there too to be on top of that, without a doubt.
And that goes back to what we led with, making the case, because you don't know what is going to be the critical piece of evidence that makes a case. And it could come from any needle in any haystack, right?
In anything. One of the things about when you have an investigation, you cannot dismiss small things. It may have seem like, oh, my mother received a strange phone call threatening. Well, when did this happen? She's had a couple, how they try to scam the elderly. What? Well, maybe it was somebody scamming the elderly, or maybe it was somebody saying, does she live alone? Is there anybody else there? They know who she was. And this is another important thing that I don't think was done initially, is looking into the victim's, her victimology. What has gone on in her life in the last 3 to 6 months? Mm-hmm. Have there been any threats received? And maybe heretofore not disclosed? Were there things that happened that she dismissed? Like just somebody talking, Did she have an argument with somebody? Did she have people who worked for her that were fired? Any of these things, they all seem somewhat kind of grasping at random straws. But again, you're attempting to find someone who is elderly, needs medication, so she cannot be gone too long without having these things. And so this all needs to be immediate, and you have to do that. You have to go through her complete background, because then that'll illustrate to you what's going on in her life and possibly give you an idea of possibly maybe this is something that happened. This could be someone who may have reason or may have motive to take her for some reason, or maybe the idea to take her was planted there. And this, you can't dismiss these things. That's why it's very important to go back into her background, especially the preceding 90 to 180-day period at least. At least I would, in my opinion.
So, talking about making the case, the evidence, right, and all these different pieces to the puzzle. How does law enforcement, especially in today's day and age, use technology to try and make these cases? What are the things that, number one, they're looking for, but then number two, the process that they go through to use the tools and resources available to them to try and break a case?
Well, one of the things you're going to do is first you're going to go subpoena her cell phone records, Mrs. Guthrie. You're going to subpoena her telephone records. You're probably going to subpoena the records of her daughters. You're going to start to also, you want to look at bank records. What did she withdraw money? Was there an unusual withdrawal? Was she paying money at things of this nature? And maybe she didn't want to pay anymore. Who knows? We don't know any of these things, but this is what you would do. You would also utilize current technology that, people talk about today. Drones. Is there anybody in the area besides, they talk about the Ring cameras and everything else, is anyone in the area flying drones? At night or anything of that nature? People do. You see them. People are taking photographs all the time and flying video drones. It's out there. This technology is fantastic. High definition. It's not like years ago where people would think, you take a very poor picture from out there. You could take pictures with fantastic resolution. You want to do that. You want to see if there were any of that available. You want to start looking at any traffic cameras, things of that nature that may indicate to you, especially the time, they've more or less narrowed down the approximate time of her disappearance early on the Sunday morning, the 1st of February. So you want to start checking things. Where's my closest cameras? What kind of traffic went by? Was it unusual traffic? Was it like for this time in the morning, was it unusual to see somebody? What type of truck? What type of car? Could they have secreted somebody in it? Was there more than one person in it? Do we have an angle to look into those cars? These are all things that could have been done technologically wise. At the scene, of course, you want to search that house. That's where she's missing from. You would search every inch of that home. And as we saw in public things, you saw that they did not search the roof. They did not go to the septic cleanup, which was shown several days later. The other thing is they should have secured the scene on day one. There were people, we're watching on the television. You see like cars, other people that were not from Pima County sheriffs.
Yeah.
And
there's a delivery person.
Delivery
pizza
and things of this nature. They all should have been kept out of there. Now, the Pima County sheriffs have approximately 1,400 or so person department. They have 400 volunteers also. Why couldn't they bring them out, block traffic off? The fact that they released the scene back to the thing in 2 or 3 days, and then they had to backtrack that when the FBI got more involved. This is.
But then it's tainted, right? I mean,
It's tainted. Not only that, you can't give it back. Once you've done that, all these people were trampling all over the crime scene. So there's all sorts of stuff. And remember, there wasn't too much there. So by you allowing other people in, the little that may be there may be destroyed and lost forever.
So I mean, right? It's easy for us to play armchair quarterback,
absolutely.
and I know it's easy for us to say that and do that. But how does something like that seems so fundamental to policing and detective work, how does that happen in especially a high-profile case? Do people crack under the pressure? Well,
it could be. See, here's the thing. So here we are. We're in a sheriff's department, and this is a big case. This is national press, and the sheriff, he was making way too many comments at first, in my opinion. I think he should have had a public information, which they do have. They have a public information office. They have a critical incident team within their investigation bureau. And the investigation bureau also has an investigation support division within their criminal. Their investigative bureau is 2 divisions, an investigative division and an investigation support division. You have all of these things, according to your information, publicly available information. You have these resources, but you're not using them. And in that criminal investigation, they have the forensics unit, so they're all under one another. It's not like they're not. But the thing is, everybody gets nervous. Everybody's, they're more worried about the cameras instead of paying attention to the job. And that happens. And it's not unique to Pima County. It does happen in a lot of things. You go back to the OJ trial and the cameras in the courtroom, right? Sure. At times, you think the judge was more concerned about how he looked on camera than what was going on in the courtroom. Was he controlling the courtroom, or was he allowing the defense to run the courtroom?
Do you think that's the case a lot of the time in the high-profile scenarios, that the pressure or the lights of the media coverage negatively impacts the police work? Yeah? I mean, are there examples where you would say that the detective work, the police work that was going on actually did a great job of keeping the media at bay?
Well, the media can help. In a case where someone's gone missing, the media can be a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. You want to get it out there, but again, say if you had, in this case, we don't know, it hasn't been disclosed, but say you had a person who had a note and threatened the missing person if you went to the media and made this public. Then, maybe you don't want it so much. Yeah. Because that person's life could be in immediate danger. They could say, oh, no, this is no good. It's too many people. And let's cut our losses and go. And you risk losing the life of your missing person, because your main goal is to locate and return that missing person safely. So you have to be careful with media coverage. If I were the Pima County Sheriff's, if I were him being there the first day, I'm the sheriff, from moving forward, public information office,
establish the authority,
and move it out. He should have also, I think, the criminal investigation division. I mean, he didn't, put them in front of the camera, which was kind of good. You would hope that would allow them to work on the case itself. But you should have also maybe picked one of the supervisors, like they have a captain. Or the bureau itself has a 2-star like deputy chief deputy that maybe could have updated the public as needed.
So yeah, I hate to just, especially as a layperson, a civilian, to poke holes in a detective work and in policing, but another issue that seems to be, I don't know if it was ego driven or something else, but they didn't want to make use of the FBI and Quantico, and they wanted to use a private lab for evidence. Like, what's that all about?
That, again, this comes down to, well, this is a high-profile case, and if we solve it, maybe our funding will go up. I'll become real. It's easy to get reelected because the sheriff happens to be an elected position.
Right.
There's all that, and of course, again, it becomes a situation where you're looking at personalities, ego, or what will benefit me. And it can never be about me or, it's about the person who's missing.
Yeah.
Or the victim of a crime, albeit in whatever circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would all agree, it's difficult. Any case like this, a missing person case, is going to be difficult for any number of reasons, especially when it's a high-profile individual. In your view, are there complications in this case that, even with the best of police work and detective work, that make this case especially difficult? Thinking about, I know I've heard about there's not that many streetlights where in the community that she lives, things like that complicate this case.
Where she lived hurts because it's a high-end area, so they're bigger properties. The houses themselves are located further off the road, back off the road. So your camera, which ordinarily would, if you had a front door camera in most neighborhoods, suburban neighborhoods, would illuminate, you'd be able to see the drive-by traffic. You don't see there because there's a lack of lighting because out in that particular area, they believe lighting is almost like a lighting pollution that it would affect their view of, the
night sky. You move out there for peace and serenity.
Peace and serenity. Yeah. So that's one thing going against them. The other thing is, of course, is that because the surrounding areas are like that, in the immediate area. So the next door neighbor doesn't help the other next door neighbor because they're all the same situation. So some of those immediate things that you would think, well, her camera was disabled, but we could get the place across the street, the place down the street. Not so much in this scenario. Again, one of the things that officers have to be mindful of, geography, location, the type of area that you're in. The other thing is they have to think about, just if they're in a pretty, at that point, they're on the outskirts of town, you can go up into the mountains, people can disappear. The border is only 60 miles away, things of that nature. And it gets quite rural out there. And you could disappear in the desert, even if, let's say, Miss Guthrie wasn't even taken involuntarily. Let's say she's elderly, blah, blah, right. And she was going out for a little stroll and then became disorientated with the extremes of heat and what have you. And in the desert, you could, and people sometimes do, just from that alone. So I was surprised that the sheriff's office wasn't more aggressive with, they do have aerial stuff and they have drones. I was surprised that they were not more aggressive right from the get-go looking in the area, because you figure Mrs. Guthrie left sometime between 1 and 2 a.m. on the morning of the first Sunday morning. I think after she hadn't appeared at church services around noon is when the alarm first get out. So let's give it an hour between maybe responding to Nancy Guthrie's daughter's house and then responding to her residence. So they had about a 12-hour ride. I'd be, if with a car, let's say not speeding, say 60 miles an hour, you have a 720-mile circle. And let's just say, or I'll even make it
including
less.
2 countries.
Yeah, including 2 countries. Let's say a 600-mile. And so how they were not in top of notifying these other surrounding areas, I was very surprised. It looked like it was more that they were running the show. I realized they are a relatively large organization, but with all the people in their organization, again, this is another thing. It's taking your resources, putting the right people in the right job, at the right place, at the right time. And it seems there was a breakdown in that way.
So one of the tools in the toolbox, especially in a high-profile case, would be money, right? A ransom, right?
Sure.
A ransom to be paid. And you start to connect the dots and you say, well, Guthrie, Savannah Guthrie makes a lot of money as an NBC headliner and so on, so we can do this for money. Well, they put out a reward, but that didn't seem to move the needle. Talk about how money in a case like this can help, or in some cases, like this one, it seems, it's not even about the money.
Well, that is a problem. Like, for example, this window for the money, notice no real big money was mentioned at first. Now, so the situation with TMZ where these little requests for small bits of money through, and a couple of them, as it turned out, although there hasn't been too much information, were proven to be false. And so if you're looking for someone and you're attempting to ransom them, okay, like you take someone, you're looking for a ransom, they seem to go about it the wrong way. I mean, they weren't really directly communicating that thing. Hell, a note that could have been pre-written out, clean, everything could have been left in the living room of her residence, or a pre-arranged delivery sent to NBC Studios in New York, where Savannah Guthrie works, or the local NBC affiliate, if you will. But none of these things were there. So,
that indicates its own probably.
Therein lies another mystery. Why was this woman taken? Was it a spur of the moment, get rich quick scheme? Did something go wrong? Remember, there was blood at the scene. Did she fight? Was she injured? And then, of course, there's this whole thing with her medication. Yeah.
It's it's awful for the family, to
extremely difficult.
Go through something like this, and especially to, have it played out on TV, obviously. Where do we go from here? I mean, we're into this for some time, and like anything else in the news cycle is it's in constant motion. So this story gets pushed down and pushed down. That has to affect the ability to gather information and really the public's interest, and thus the chances of finding her. I mean, is that accurate to say?
Oh, yes, without a doubt. See, like when you have an incident happen, albeit whatever it is, the first, like on TV, they talk about 48 hours. I would argue the first from 0 to about the first 100 hours are extremely important. If you don't get anywhere in that first 100 hours, especially in a situation like this, you have troubles. But it isn't always indicative. There was the young woman who was kidnapped in, I believe it was Utah, and she was recovered a couple of years later.
Yeah.
Would it be great if this turned out to be the case and she was okay? It'd be wonderful in Ms. Guthrie's case, but I don't think so, given her age, her medical status, the fact that the family has offered money, and there's been not even a petering of an attempt to call, because I'm sure if there was, I'm sure that we'd probably have known something by this time. For the investigators in this case, they have to just keep working it.
So So what are they doing? Legitimately, as the case gets colder and colder, what does an investigator do to sort of circle back on maybe leads or evidence that they didn't do a deep enough dive on? What is an investigator doing to try and make a break in this case?
Well, the investigator has to go into Mrs. Guthrie's life. As I said, sort of like a victimology of her, going back into her life, everything she's done the last 3, 6 months, a year, to how did we get to here? Was there something that occurred? Was there an event that happened to her that possibly could, did she have an argument? Was there a disgruntled employee? Was there, like I said, when I was mentioned earlier about talking about banking records and everything, was someone actually maybe siphoning money off and she didn't want to bother her daughters? She was going to take care of it. Now that wasn't enough for that person, because it never is. And maybe this time she said, no, I've had enough. And then something untoward happened. We don't know, because it's all speculation, because we don't know what happened to this woman. For the investigator, they have to go into her life. They have to find out what she was doing every day, who she met with, what was her routine, where did she go? Was there something happened? Something happened along that line. Maybe she met someone, maybe she slighted someone, maybe there was an incident that maybe, most people would have dismissed, but maybe someone else did not. You don't know. You don't know.
How can I know there was some talk about the backpack, right? That it was a backpack that was maybe sold at a Walmart. What can law enforcement do to try and track back a purchase like that?
They will go to the point of purchase if they can. And if there's video, like if they get a receipt, or if they get a time frame, it came from this Walmart. Okay, when did it come into the store? Now, inventory controls are pretty sophisticated these days. They'll know when it goes out because it gets scanned. See, everything gets scanned. So they'll know when that came into the store. They'll know when it went out of the store. And if you can get that time, then what do? You start looking at the video within the store, see if you can identify that person. Now, the federal government, as we found out from like the Ring camera, first the Pima County Sheriff couldn't get the cloud footage. Then the federal government leaned on them, and then, voila, we were able to retrieve it from the cloud, yes. That's what needs to be done. And I would think in a case like this where you tell, like, say, a big outfit like Walmart, we don't really do that, the customer's privacy. This is for the Nancy Guthrie case. We'll pull out all the stops for that. Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to say, well, what's this about? Well, to be honest with you, keep it under your hat. It's an active investigation, but this is for Nancy Guthrie. Oh, wait a minute. Yes. We'll see if we can pull that up right away.
And then, of course,
sometimes you can. It depends on the skill of the investigators too. Like, in other words, you say, true, the media, moves on to the next thing, but the investigators, they can help keep that case alive. The investigators, by being dedicated to the case, there will come a time when they're going to have to make an administrative decision, I'm sure, but your dedication to the case, keep dogging on the case. And believe it or not, sometimes you can break these cases. Sometimes things that look like they've gone cold, you never know what could happen. Now, in this case here, did she have a medical emergency? Did she maybe, as a result of a struggle, pass away? That leads to, you got thousands and thousands of square miles where she could be buried. And a lot of it's rural. And, they're looking, as now in the Epstein case, they're looking at his ranch in New Mexico for bodies that could have been buried there 20 or more years ago. This is what it is. And people disappear all the time, especially
still looking for Jimmy Hoffa, too,
but vulnerable populations. Like in this case, Miss Guthrie is not so much as vulnerable as a regular elderly person because she's the mother of a high-profile person, but just a regular elderly person who sometimes disappear. Most family and friends are gone. No one ever knows. Vulnerable populations like prostitutes, the homeless, sometimes young children. Yeah, they're not, mom and dad care, and usually, hopefully. And people will look for them, but how many children go missing every year? How many people? So we have to be very cognizant of our vulnerable populations, the young, the elderly, and those who have individual challenges.
We talked about, and I think this will get us home very shortly, but want to bring back up the fact that the Mexican border is 60 miles away. How does that complicate things for trying to make this case?
Well, here's the thing. Could it been someone who maybe comes back and forth across the border be involved in this? Could they have taken her across the border? Now you're dealing with another country. Now, fortunately, they're our immediate neighbor to the south. Our relationship usually is pretty good. Right now, who knows? We're not too sure. But one has to be cognizant of that. And then, of course, the other problem with it being Mexico is Mexico's having its own problems internally about controlling, what's going on within their own borders. So is it possible? We've seen it before with spring breakers. We've seen it with people across the border and things that have happened that can really complicate things. So if it was a different situation, maybe, we might be able to get a little bit more, but they're having their issues on that side of the border too, because they have a lot of problems with kidnappings, things of that nature.
I think the point is, and after all this time, we just don't know. So we're all grasping at
Yeah,
straws.
we're all speculating. I mean, a lot of it is because there has been no firm. Like I said, you would think her high-profile daughter who has money, you would think there'd be a ransom.
Yeah.
Not there.
Yeah.
Why did they come to her house? People say, for some of the speculation first, they're very professional. They were not professional. In my opinion, they were not professional. Why? A professional person would suspect that there's a camera. What would I have done? I would have come out of view of the camera, and I wouldn't be looking for some plant or growth by the door. I would have duct tape. That would be the first thing. They would never have seen me if that were me. And most professionals, some of the people who actually do this for a living, statue people, they're very cognizant of these things. So I think this was maybe something that happened on the spur of the moment. It may have been a chance encounter, but we don't know when that chance encounter happened. And
where it ended.
And where it ended.
Yeah.
Precisely.
So we, and I say this, that we do keep the Guthrie family in our thoughts, and we would hope for a return of Nancy, just like we would any missing
with
person.
Anyone, yeah.
And
I mean, our ultimate goal is the safe return of the missing person, and that has to be that is the story. The safe return of the missing person. For the family, this is an extremely trying time. Her sister is like, a regular person and everything, our brother. But for her, she is a national figure. And this is something that people are going to come up to her because she works in the news industry and everything. And so this is going to be a very difficult thing for her. If I were the Pima County Sheriffs and those running this investigation, I would have people with her for a while. And what I mean by that, investigators, because you never know. Someone may try to approach her, things of that nature. And that way you could be on top of it. I would sit her and her family down and say, hey, look, right now it looks like the attention's going away, but we're not forgetting about this case. That would be one of the things if I were the Pima County Sheriff office. I would tell them, we're not forgetting about this case. I'm sure the FBI will do the same. We're not forgetting about this case. But this is some things I would maybe have a liaison, a plainclothes liaison with her for some time, because just in case someone tries to make contact, I would be monitoring their communications for a while, with their permission, of course, to see if anybody's trying to reach out to them and what have you. Because this is how we try to have a successful resolution to this case.
Just looking for that.
And then the other unfortunate parts of it is that you're going to start, you get as detailed description of you can as Miss Guthrie. Then you're starting to look the more unfortunate sides of it. Has a body come into a hospital? Has a body shown up in a morgue? Things of this nature. This is where the more unfortunate, or the bad outcome, is where the police, and they have to be diligent in that, because if you're not doing that, who knows? This poor woman could be laying as
a Jane Doe somewhere.
Somewhere. She's pretty well known, but that depends on the condition of the body. And these are the things that they're going to have to do. They're going to have to communicate with all places concerned that these things. But as you mentioned earlier, the border being right there, we don't really have that.
Yeah, not the same jurisdiction that we would have here. Yeah.
That we have here, and although I'm sure they would be willing to help, but there's a lot of instability and what have you.
We don't have access the same way.
As what was in the paper just rather recently, one of the stadiums they want to use for the World Cup, they found a mass grave next to it.
So yeah.
So they are dealing with those issues. So we can't be sure of that assistance, as it were.
Well, in our own way, I hope our conversation is a way of keeping the case alive, and
Oh, absolutely.
hoping that maybe they can make a case. And obviously having the perspective of somebody who is a college professor, I hope that helps educate a little bit for the lay people and civilians who don't know how this works. But again, also tries to keep it alive in the public sphere.
Well, that's what it is. I mean, look, until she's found one way or the other, this is an active case. And hopefully, we always hope for a positive resolution. But we always want a resolution to this case. For if anything, it would at least give the family peace, but when you don't have a resolution, this is what haunts family, friends, relatives, sometimes for the rest of their lives, unfortunately. This is a tough thing. And that's why it's important for police and law enforcement to always keep them top of mind, because and try to put ourselves a little bit out of the picture, our egos and what have you. And it's about the person, the victim of the crime, or the person who's missing, and it's about them and finding them, bringing them home, ideally safely to their family. And if not, if we bring them, at least we find them, and at least we give some sort of closure to the family of the victim.
Professor Frank Corrigan, Bergen Community College, thank you very much, former NYPD, for this conversation on making the case for missing people, and in this case, Nancy Guthrie. Thank you very much, Professor.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Never mind the noise and the chatter. We're here for intelligent, fact-based conversation on Bergen Banter, and we will see you again down the road.